Thank you everyone for coming to day 3 of the 8th annual Bushwick Film Festival. We've had 2 days of lots of amazing events, parties, screenings, and today I'm excited to introduce you to we're going to have our Women in Film and TV panel and reception. First, I want to give an apology that we're running 30 minutes behind schedule. So we are going to be having our screening at 1:30 instead of 1 p.m. So to start the Women in Film and TV panel, I want to call up our panelists. We have Samantha Marp from agent at Binestock. Yay!
Where should I go? Here?
You can, whichever chair is more comfortable for you. Jenny Halper, development executive at Maven Pictures. Kai Youngblood, supervising producer at Brick. We should all just like squeeze up on this couch. I'm just kidding. And then we have Leela Yamtube, writer, director, executive producer at Largest Media. I may have mispronounced your last name. I have the same difficulty when people pronounce my name. So please forgive me if I did and correct me if I...
It's Lila.
Okay.
Is this on? Lila Yamtube.
Okay. Does everybody have... You guys can have...
Hello.
You can have this. There we go. Thank you so much for joining us. We are live streaming, so thank you for everyone at home that's watching us right now. Joining us at the 8th annual Bushwick Film Festival Women in TV panel. I'm, as a female in the entertainment industry, I'm so excited always to have this panel, to be able to sit down and speak with women that have years and years of experience in the industry and could share some experience, strength, and hope to people out there who are just starting in the industry or have years in it. We're just going to jump right into the questions. Actually, if all of you guys could first start with, reintroducing yourself again and then telling us a little bit about your company and your experience.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm Sam. I'm an agent at Beanstalk, a United Talent Agency company. That sounds super fancy. Basically, we are the alternative television and digital content arm of UTA, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with as a big Hollywood talent agency. I work with both on-camera personalities, producers, directors, and production companies in all areas of unscripted content, so whether that be in television, digital, or otherwise, Snapchat, what have you. That's me. So I work with some digital stars, some reality stars, some broadcast journalists, and basically just some really cool content creators who are trying to get their stuff out there. And I help them do that, negotiate their deals, and get them paid for what they do. And that's me.
Yeah, I think everyone would like to speak with you after this.
Yes, getting paid for what you do. That's it. That is the key.
I'm Jenny. I work at, can everybody hear me? Yeah. All right. I work at Maven Pictures, which is a development and production and financing film company that's based here in New York. It's run by Trudy Styler and Celine Rattray. I've been there the company is 4 years old, but I've been working for Celine Rattray, who runs Maven, and who also ran Mandalay Vision for 6 years. And some of the films we've done have been The Kids Are All Right, Bernie, The Whistleblower, Girl Most Likely. We have Andrea Arnold's American Honey in post-production right now. Celine and Trudy also executive produced Still Alice and Miss You Already, which just premiered at the Toronto Film Festival and was released in the UK. And essentially what I do is look for content and try to make it as good as possible. So that's looking for scripts and working with writers whose material we think might make a good film and trying to make that as strong as possible, looking for books to option and develop into screenplays, looking for foreign films to option and develop into screenplays. And then once we have a script that we want to take out and make a film, figuring out how to package that. So who's the best director for this project? How do we build a cast and attach people to this project? That's pretty much what I do.
Kaya?
Hi, everybody. My name is Kai Youngblood, and I work for BRIC. BRIC is a multidisciplinary arts organization. We're pretty much at this point best known for Celebrate Brooklyn. We do the Celebrate Brooklyn series in Prospect Park. We also have a contemporary art arm, which is called Rotunda Gallery. We were formerly in Brooklyn Heights, but now we're all at BRIC House in Fort Greene on Rockwell Place. And I work for BRIC TV, which was formerly Brooklyn Independent Media. We just rebranded ourselves recently. And as the supervising producer over basically that channel, I work a lot with development. I do a lot of resourcing with our staff. I'm constantly looking at independent contractors and freelance producers, editors. We just did our first scripted series, so I've actually worked closely with commissioning filmmakers for new content, web series, and that sort of thing. So that's pretty much what I do.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lila Yamtube, and I'm executive producer of a company called Largesse Media. We specialize in marketing and outreach and consulting for independent filmmakers. I'm also an independent filmmaker myself. I made a feature-length film that went to film festivals in 2005 called High Life. I have a short film narrative doing the festival circuit now called America 1979. I used to be a sound editor. I worked on a bunch of really big movies and small movies and documentaries, and I won an Emmy for an HBO documentary called Baghdad ER. That's a little about me.
Wow. I don't know where to start after those descriptions and all these, we have an Emmy Award winner here. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so Samantha, can you tell us a little bit what your understanding is about negotiating deals, and what's the biggest difficulty that creators, filmmakers have when it comes to getting to the negotiating table?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's kind of a multifaceted question. I think what's really interesting about negotiation is people don't realize how much we negotiate throughout the creative process. You really negotiate every part of the creative process, whether it be getting a talent on board, getting a PA to get you that coffee, whatever it is, you're actually negotiating every step of the way. Getting to the negotiating table as far as a buyer or a distributor is pretty difficult. I think as content creators, most of you know that there are so many steps along the way where things can fall apart. Maybe a network says, oh yeah, let's do a pilot, non-airable. And then they say, actually, maybe it's gonna be airable. And then they focus test it, and then it goes away. Or maybe they focus test it and it does well, and then you move on to the next step, the next step, the next step. I think some of the biggest challenges in negotiating is the precious nature of every project. As content creators, you put so much time, so much effort, so much heart into every step of this process. And so every time you feel like you're giving a little more away, everyone feels a little bit worse about the process. So it's my job as an agent to really protect that process and really get what is due to my clients, whether that be credit, money, or otherwise. Otherwise meaning retention of rights, reversion rights, just giving them the opportunity to distribute it not just on television, but also digitally, maybe internationally. I think that can be very difficult, and it's very difficult when it's your project. The creative process is so different from the business end of the spectrum, so having someone on your team to really negotiate for you and who understands the business side of this business is always very helpful.
That, I feel like, as a content creator, when do you start moving from the sphere of creating content for free and then when do you realize that your content could actually, that you shouldn't create content for free anymore? Yeah.
I think I think you just have to believe in it. I really do. I don't think there's, what's so great about content distribution today, especially in the digital age, is the barrier to distribution is so low. Now that can be a really good thing for content creators. It can also be a very bad thing, because a lot of buyers or third parties will say, oh, we'll just throw it up on YouTube. You can do that. Don't worry about it. And everyone's like, oh, okay, so I'll throw it up on YouTube. And I know a lot of people on YouTube making tons of money. For every person who is making $1 million off of YouTube, there are 1 million people making no money off of YouTube. So I think you just have to have that belief. There's no, unfortunately, rhyme or reason to when a project goes from being unpaid to paid. It's really all about timing and all of the bits and pieces kind of fitting together perfectly. I've worked on projects for years before they've taken off in any sort of capacity, and that's an unscripted. When it comes to scripted, I feel like the process is even longer. So you just really have to have that belief and keep pushing and keep kind of putting it out to people, networking, making sure that you're getting it in front of the right people and taking those risks. Because if you really believe in your project and you say, hey, I see some other show on television that isn't as good as my show in a realistic sense, or I saw that film and I kind of have something similar or something that I think speaks more deeply to that audience. Just keep pushing and getting it out there. And at some point, something will happen. You have to have that belief.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit too. I mean, I've seen projects that were in development when I was an intern and had been in development when I was an intern, which was 6-7 years ago, for a very long time, that are now actually getting released and that are in a better, that have better attachments or a better version of the project than they would have been had they been made 6 years ago. In terms of the paid aspect, I think that's always really hard, because I've worked with incredibly talented writers who are, for instance, playwrights but want to learn how to write a screenplay, so they'll write something for us on a speculative basis. And there's one of those scripts that looks like it's getting close to getting made. And then there are writers who've worked with us on a speculative basis and that project might not get made. And so it's like, I always think it's hard if you haven't had a project get made yet or a screenplay get optioned to say whether or not there should be some sort of a fee. But I'm not an agent, so I always defer to business people. But I think that's actually what I found to be the most challenging aspect of this business, the combination of creativity and commerce, because you can't put a price on something that's fantastic, and you can't put a price on the different stages of the creative process, because I think each creative person has different steps that they take to get to the finish line. And you do want people to get compensated, but that is something that I find always very tricky to figure out exactly how to put a number on things that don't really have a number until you actually see something completed. Does that make sense?
No, that definitely makes sense. My sister-in-law, she came to the festival this year from California. She works at Google, and right after the screening, she said, everything was amazing, but I don't really understand the economics behind this whole thing. How is this working? So yeah, the creativity and commerce and trying to make it work, that I think that's clearly the biggest puzzle. Kai, at Brick, you guys stream and create a lot of content, especially a lot of community content. Do people go to Brick with an idea that eventually what they are building will hopefully give some sort of economic return?
Definitely. I mean, the cool thing I think about what we do is we're public access. We're the public access arm of Brooklyn. Every borough has one. Every state is supposed to have one by law. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people that come to us. Some of them have degrees in film. Some of them are community people who just want to come and learn how to edit or how to write screenplays and different things. And so everyone comes to us with this hope and this dream of getting something created. And depending on how dedicated, how good the idea is, how much help they have, because it's really a community effort. You can't do it by yourself, It depends on how far they get. Some people walk away with a proof of concept, and they can take it and shop it around, and it's amazing where they go. I have someone that worked with me as an intern for years, and then he became an AP, then he became a producer, and now he's like working at like Vampire Diaries in Atlanta, which, you know, it is what it is, but he's also working on other projects. He's working with a lot of emerging filmmakers and things like that. So it is interesting, but there are a lot of people that come to us wanting that first shot, you know, and that's something that we really try to create platforms across the company in different mediums, including film and media and television to make that happen. So definitely.
I could really attest to that. Brick gave me my first shot. I had my first, we still have our first talk show, Indie Cinema New York, at Brick, and definitely we had eight episodes, and it definitely gave me like the practice and the experience that I think I needed to go to the. Actually, I want to stay with you guys. I'm trying to get season 2.
We want you to stay.
I'm trying to stay.
It's a beautiful balance because we've got channels to fill.
Yeah.
We are trying to strengthen our digital presence and platform, and so it's very much a synergy. It's, you know, we've got the space.
You have a beautiful space.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we need the content. We need the content makers. We need the media makers. We need folks like you with ideas to come and help us fill it out. So
Hope you guys are hearing that at home.
Yes.
Brick needs some amazing content creators, so definitely give Kai a call or email. Right
email
after.
pitches@bricktv.org. K Youngblood.
Well, you've been in the industry for quite some time now, and I want to keep it a little bit on the conversation about creativity and commerce. What have you seen? How has it changed over the years in your industry, or in your profession?
Well, in, you know, sort of speaking to what we've been talking about here for independent filmmakers, there are many more platforms for distribution and ways for people to see movies. Just like this film festival here, you know, you independently made this happen. So, and similarly now, especially for documentary films, there are a number of grants out there that will help filmmakers with distribution and outreach, and showing a film isn't limited to movie theaters, television, and festivals anymore. There are so many people who are using films as educational tools, as community building tools, and so people, especially like if you have an issue-based film, you can create a campaign and a screening series across the country through nonprofit organizations, schools, places of worship. And, you know, again, when it comes down to the commerce part, that's sort of that's the difficult thing. You know, so grants, you know, MacArthur, Chicken and Egg, there's all of these grants that will help, especially with the distribution end, to make that happen. And so that's part of I think that's part of the digital revolution, as we're calling it, that so many people can tell their stories and share their voice, but we need more places to see those films. And it's just the money continues to be an issue on that level.
Especially, I mean, you run a marketing company for films, and marketing is always the biggest struggle, I feel, for filmmakers and people that have companies, the Bushwick Film Festival. How can a filmmaker get their product out there without a marketing budget? You know, what are some, or do you work with filmmakers on low budgets, and how do you work with them?
If it's low budget or no budget, I consult, because it is really labor-intensive work. I mean, you can do a little and you can do a lot. It really depends on what your resources are. So, you know, obviously, the easiest thing to do is through social media, and, you know, having a website and a mailing list. Those are like the very bare minimum things that you should be doing. And then, you know, there's outreach. So you get into a film festival, and what do? I mean, you don't just do your social media, but you figure out what audiences you have and you try and pull those audiences in. You know, you send out your press releases, you do all of these things, and you sort of have to hammer away, but the most important thing is to figure out who your audience is and try and bring them in. And that could be complicated. Sometimes you think you know who your audience is and you're not quite right. So sometimes there's a little trial and error there to actually find who is interested in your film, and that's part of the process. And I enjoy it because as an independent filmmaker, I've had to do that myself, and I find that it's really gratifying to help people share their movies, because we make these movies not so they sit in a box, but so people see them. So,
Jenny, what do you look for in a script when you're about to pick it up? Like, what should filmmakers think about writing in their script that would increase their chances of working with you?
Well, when I was first starting, I would always look for great characters, because one of the things that I found very quickly reading a lot of scripts, and often I'll read 10 to 15 scripts a week, is that a lot of screenwriters, that at least the ones that were coming to me, felt like they were trying to craft something that was playing to the marketplace and maybe had some good twists and turns, but it didn't feel like it had real people in it. And so when I was starting off, if a script felt like it was about real human beings, that would go a really long way with me. It still does. But what I've also learned is that there's a huge difference between something that works great on the page and something that will actually work when it goes up on the screen. I've watched now, I'm going to say, 15 movies in post-production and seen some good scripts maybe not work, and some scripts that were pretty good get turned around and work really well. So I think what I really look for right now is a combination of great character and a story that is incredibly distinctive, that hasn't been told before, and that needs to be told in the format of a movie. Because there are so many amazing books and so many amazing articles, and some books are just meant to be books, and they really shouldn't be a movie, and what's special about them isn't something that's necessarily going to be told in a visual medium. I'm particularly interested in stories that I don't think I've ever seen before in a film medium, and stories that are in a world that I haven't seen before. So for example, and this is a movie that we're executive producers on, and I wouldn't ever want to take credit for anything about it because it's Andrea Arnold and she's a genius, but it's set in the world of these kids who are on a magazine crew and who are traveling around middle America and are just very kind of interesting, unique people doing something that I've not seen in a movie. And so that was one of the reasons we were interested in that. We have another movie that we've developed from a book called The Mothers, that's set in the world of domestic adoption, and is about a very sheltered Brooklyn couple that have their eyes really open to kind of race and class as they travel around America, meeting these different birth mothers who have very different experiences than they have. And that was something that I loved the book. It had a great voice. It was a great story. But it was also about, I have not seen adoption dealt with in this way. And I think that this narrator and this woman who's at the center of this story has a very unique perspective on it. And something that should be shown, not just read, as much as I think it's a book that everybody should read. It's called The Mothers by Jennifer Gilmore. So those are, I think, I tend to ramble, but really character, what is the world that this story is set in, and have we ever seen it in a movie before? And also, what is really special about the story, and why should it be watched and not just read or seen in another medium?
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about your educational backgrounds. Did you study what did you study in college?
So,
and how is that relating to your current career?
So I have a degree in public relations, also known as a degree in bullshit, and that's what I do all day. That's what I do all day. So yes, even though I didn't know it at the time. So yes, I have a degree in communications and public relations from the Pennsylvania State University. I'm a very proud Nittany Lion, Big Ten football. And I was working in the entertainment industry, interning all through college. So it just so happened that I ended up being an agent, and I've used my education to my advantage, I would say.
What did you study, Jenny?
I studied theater and English undergrad at Northwestern, but have been obsessed with movies since I was probably 3 or 4 years old. I did my master's at Emerson 7 years ago in creative writing, and ended up working in Emerson's LA campus doing a lot of internships in film, and kind of at the same time as I was in grad school, and right when from the end of college through grad school, I was doing film journalism, if you can really call it that, because it was becoming a lot of blogging. But I was getting to interview a lot of actors and directors and getting to find out more about how films were made. And then realizing that what I really wanted to do wasn't writing about movies, it was finding a way to get involved in the making of them. And I think as much as I learned a ton in college and in grad school, I think my real education was in interviewing people and finding out how their movies came to be.
I too was a theater studies major at Southern Methodist University of all places. Being a Brooklyn girl, that was an interesting change for me, going to Dallas, Texas. But I was a double major, so I was theater studies and communications, and partly because my mother said, you need a backup plan.
Oh, the backup plan.
The backup plan. But the cool thing is, I felt there was a lot of crossover between theater and what was at the time called communications. I mean, it's got a lot of other cool names now and a lot of other programs around the country. But I feel like I really kind of cut my teeth in the working world. Like, that's where I learned a lot about, I learned so much more about producing and writing when I started working. And there's a lot that carries over. And just kind of picking up on what you said, the whole idea of characters, like, that goes a long, long way. You know, even now when we are looking at what we think we want to partner with to produce, it's like, what's that hook? You know, who are these people? What's that unique story or perspective? You know, we're always looking for that. So, yeah.
I went to NYU for
Woo!
film and television. I come from, when I was a kid, I did a lot of photography and writing and painting. I was more of a creative background, and then all of a sudden it started to make sense to try and make movies because there was all of those things. And I started more in experimental, and then like suddenly I got more interested in narrative, and I didn't really necessarily think I was going to end up in the entertainment industry. It was more of like an art practice for me as a young person, and but it's so multifaceted and interesting that there's always more to learn and more to do. So I've been in it for a little while now, and but similar to Kai, I feel like most of my learning has been from doing, and I'm sort of a doer personality, and like being in the mix and doing it is like always been the best education for me.
If it wasn't obvious, I also went to NYU. Not that I didn't like any of your other colleges. So I want to talk clearly a little bit about women in the entertainment industry, but how have you helped other young women that are eager and interested and just starting new? Have you done, or do you focus on a quota particularly when you look through scripts or when you look at content? Do you specifically make it clear that that's what you are trying to, you know, you're trying to increase the numbers?
I actually do. I'm actually very passionate about working with young women as on-camera personalities that aren't the typical on-camera female personalities that we're used to seeing. I actually make it a point to work with more ethnically diverse women, women of all shapes, sizes, backgrounds. That's really something I pride myself on. And working with younger women, maybe young comedians, young people who are on social media, to really help them take that next step, because I think there are a lot of minefields out there for young women and young women of color, honestly, in the creative community. So that's something I actually really focus on. And then, as fate would have it, most of our assistants at the agency are female. And so I tend to give the one or two male assistants a bit of a hard time. Noticeably a bit of a hard time. And just because I feel like with mostly male agents in our company, if there's one guy in the assistant pool, he kind of gets brought along a little bit more easily. So I kind of make it a point to make it just a little more difficult for them.
How do you make it more difficult for men in your industry?
Well, I work at a company that's 4 women and 2 guys, so I feel like I've got a little bit of an advantage maybe. But I mean, a lot of what I do from a day to day is put together lists of talent to attach to projects, and often that's filmmakers. And I try really, really, really hard to make those lists half and half. It's insane how difficult that is, because there are just so many more men who have heat or value or whatever it is that will get a project going. And sometimes I find that infuriating. But I try very hard on that front. And then I also really try to look for great female roles. I mean, the adoption one is one story that we're doing. We just started working on a movie about this woman in the MMA world, and it's kind of like a female Rocky. And the thing that attracted me to that, beyond the fact that it's a really great script, was this is something that I feel is a person and a world and a different portrayal of a woman who's extremely flawed but also very commendable. And I haven't seen that. And so the thing that hooked me into that initially was this great female character. And I'm always, always, always looking for really great female roles, and always also looking if this is could this male lead be somehow switched to a female, and how would that affect things?
I would say definitely. That's a mandate of mine, especially as a woman of color. You know, I started out in corporate television, and it was very white and very male, and there just weren't a lot of examples of me. And coming back home to Brooklyn has been amazing, especially at a place like Brick, which is just inherently multicultural in a place like Brooklyn. And you can't help but do the work. I mean, the people that are coming there are people of color, are young, are, you know, older. I mean, everyone is there. And so there's like a lot of room to kind of mentor folks. And so, yeah, I mean, it happens every day. You know, we have people go from interns to APs to producers. Sometimes they stay with the company, sometimes they move on. And the beauty of it is you create this wonderful pool of different kinds of people, you know, who branch out but always stay connected. So.
Well, whenever I'm in a position to hire, I also really try to hire women if it's appropriate, you know, when I can. And I've mentored a few of my interns, which has been really gratifying. And I've been meeting a lot of younger women who are really powerful, and it's really exciting, actually, to see that I feel like they're coming up in a much different way than I did. And when I meet these young women, sometimes through classes I teach or through work, I keep in touch, and I'll, you know, help them when I can, because I think it's really exciting. You know, I think there's been, you know, it's easy to point to Lena Dunham for like opening up a world for young women, even though, you know, her voice is very specific, but I think it's really, she's really helped, you know, young women and women in general be seen in a different way in our industry. So, yeah, so when I'm in a position to help younger women or women in general, I do, and I think actually as and I work with a lot of women in general, and I think even just in that work, I'm helping to further the female voice, which is, it's very specific. It's like a very, very detailed thing. Like when a woman's written a script, you know, the way it's different is very subtle. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to be that it's a female-driven character, a female-driven story, but just the voice. You know, there are subtle details in character and storytelling that shift when it comes from a woman's perspective, and I think that's a really important thing to foster.
I'm just going to ask one or two more questions before we open it up to actually one question before we open it up to the audience. This year, of course, everyone probably, well, not everyone, but if you're in the entertainment world, you should have watched the Emmys. Right? And the one thing that Viola Davis said was about opportunity. Mm-hmm. Have you, in your career, saw an opportunity that was not given to a woman of color or a woman in general, whether it's a script, and have you had that experience? And you don't have to be specific with what it was. How did it affect you, and what were some of the things that you did to hopefully make some change for the next writer, next script writer, next actor?
I've got a very specific example in mind. For me, I've been very lucky. Before Beanstalk was acquired by UTA, it was still a small family-owned and operated agency. We have maybe about 40 people total. So coming up in an agency that way, I was mentored by a variety of people. I had a lot of opportunity, and I just kind of kept my nose to the grindstone. I think that's the saying, and worked really hard and had the opportunity to move up quickly. I don't think as a woman in some of the larger agencies, or perhaps my new parent company, it would have been as quick an ascent, and I recognize that. Recently, I had a client who happens to be a woman of color, who did not have her contract renewed for a reason that really I can't speak about openly, but it has to do with a male colleague of hers, not necessarily liking her personally and liking someone else, another female, a white female, much better in a personal manner. I'll let you marinate on that. And when I found out the reason behind her contract not getting renewed, I kind of lost it. I really just went off the rails because I felt like in 2015, for personal matters between a man and a woman to be the reason why a talented young person's contract is not renewed at a news network is appalling to me. And so I kicked and screamed in my office for a while. And then I called the head of business affairs at this specific network, and I just said, I think you're going to have a real problem on your hands really soon. So think about what you're doing, check your other talent, and get it together. In a very nice, measured way. There were some other words dropped in there, of course. But it's...
Can you be my agent?
Yes. It's just, it's crazy to me that in 2015, as women, and yes, sometimes as men, there are still those salacious things that happen that affect someone's ability to advance in their career, but it does happen. And the only way that we can fix it is by fixing ourselves and fixing our own attitudes so that in the future it doesn't continue to happen.
Anyone have something to say to that?
Yes, I don't have a specific example, but I think my experience is just to bring my personal perspective to the table. Because I think part of the reason why a lot of times you don't see necessarily more women and more people of color is, I think sometimes it's kind of a passive ignorance. You know, it's just that it's not in your face, you're not being informed, you don't know. And if you're surrounded by the sameness all the time, you're just not thinking about the differentness, you know? And so I think it's really about saying, hey, you know, let's tap into the network of folks I know, and let's hear their ideas, and let's bring it to the table, and then we can all be the judge, you know? So it's about being bold too, and not being afraid, and not being scared to be wrong, you know, and just saying, okay, well, I have something to say too, and it's important that for you to hear what these other perspectives are, you know, and so it's just about kind of opening the dialogue and bringing these opportunities to light.
I worked in a place where I was the only woman.
Place.
I'm trying to remain a little anonymous about this situation, but I was the only woman on the floor with maybe 40 men.
40?
I'd say, depending on the day, between 20 and 40 men.
Wow.
And, you know, you want to talk about boys' club. There were days where I had to enter a room and it was like a bunch of guys, and sometimes they'd be drinking scotch. And, you know, and that's cool. That's cool. But why aren't I invited to drink the scotch with these guys? That's fine. That's fine. They're buddies. I mean, and that's, I think, one of the things we need to do is we need to drink scotch together. But what I mean by that really is that, you know, men fraternize with men, and they it's natural. They bring men into the room with them. And I think that that's, there's less women, and we have to do that too. We have to bring women into the room with us and continue to do that and meet each other and know each other and help each other grow. But back to this story, there was one day that I went into the bathroom and there was Victoria's Secret catalog and a Popular Mechanics pinup issue. Not kidding. Not kidding. And I was like, what do I do? So luckily the manager of the facility was a woman. She wasn't on the same floor. But I went to her and I was like, this is happening. And, this is a situation where I was pretty new and I was junior for sure. And it's a situation where there's a lot of competition and you want to stick around and you want to grow and you don't want to be the snitch, right? You want people to like you. And it's like, well, what do you do? So I was like, well, I got to tell her this is really uncool. Would this happen if there were more women on this floor? This would not happen. So I went to her and she was furious and she took them out and she scolded some people. And then the next week I go into a room and there's a guy reading Maxim. And I just go up to him and I'm like, Maxim, huh? And he's like, leave me alone, I'm a man. So, that's actually that is probably the most blatant thing that's ever happened to me. I know it's really, really complicated for on-air people. Talent is really, really tough. But the rest of it, usually it's hard to point to, oh, I'm a woman of color. How is that affecting me positively or negatively? It's really hard to know because no one's going to say anything to you. Sometimes it's in the details of how people behave, but people have to remain so quiet in general because we feel like we need to maintain our careers and it's hard to speak out about these things. So we stay positive in what we can do in a positive way. And I think that's really the thing to really focus on and to practice.
We can open it up to questions from the audience, if there is any. Yeah.
I just wanted to thank all of you for that vital information that you just gave all of us. And I'm one of the males here, which is very, very few, and I feel like going like this.
Thank you for joining us.
But I just wanted to say that most men I feel today are honestly changing. I feel the tide is changing, and I myself have changed. I've always been, I would say, towards the male side, but I have changed quite a bit in the last few years, which makes an important difference. I think it does. And I'll drink scotch with you anytime. But the one thing I didn't hear from you, it's not that I didn't hear from you, what I would like to hear from you is a life experience that made you go into the field you're going. And also, a lot of people can do what you're doing for a long time and suck at it for a long time, if you know what I'm saying. But life's experiences, for me, as a person who didn't go to college, I did, and I'm a producer, a writer, a director, a singer, whatever the hell you want me to be, I will be. But at the same time, a life's experience that turned you on, that made you think, hey, this is what I want to do. And this is what I didn't hear from any one of you. And I really would like to hear at least one of you say something. Life's experience turned you on.
I don't know if this is going to be good enough, but honestly, I saw the series Entourage, and I said, I can do that. Yeah, I did. I said, I could go toe-to-toe with that guy. Or more so that I want that challenge. Yeah, and it's funny because my first day at Beanstalk, I was like, cool, you got this, Sam. Take no prisoners. You're not here to make friends. And I quickly realized that wasn't really the corporate culture Like, everyone was really chill, relaxed, very encouraging, wanting you to do well. And so I came in and I was like, I'm going to be an agent. I'm going to be in the agent trainee program, and I'm going to make it in like a year. And so after maybe 6 weeks, I walked into the agent who I was working for's office, and I was like, listen, I need to be applying for the agent trainee program. I am going to be an agent. He's like, okay, Sam, consider yourself applied. We don't have an agent training program here. But you're in it, okay? So Entourage really gave me the mindset to start on this path and challenge myself.
I would say for me, it was also a television show. Does anyone remember Fame?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that makes you feel better. So, you know, I was a Brooklyn kid, and Fame would come on, and it would be like, shh, I'm watching Fame. And that's where I got that spark. And then from there, I told my dad, I'm auditioning for that school. And I had a really interesting theater teacher in junior high school. She was a substitute teacher, but she was darn good. She was from Romania, and she started teaching us about Stanislavski and all these acting methods. And here I am, like 11 and 12 years old, like learning about all this stuff. And I auditioned, and I got in. And I was like, wow, this is possible. I wound up not going because, you know, my mom was like, we're getting the heck out of New York. And I wound up going to another art school in another state. But I think that was the turning point for me. And even though I didn't pursue the acting track, because it is hard, getting out there and auditioning and putting yourself on the line all the time, it's hard. But I kept that creativity in my life, in my career choices. And I would say that was the turning point for me, was wanting it and then getting it, like getting some acknowledgement, like, yeah, come on in, you can do this, you know. So that was the turning point for me.
I think it was a movie for me. It was A League of Their Own, which I saw when I was 9. And I was like,
When I saw that, I wanted to change the world.
I was like, Gina Davis is the coolest person ever, and I want to be like her when I grow up. And that didn't happen, but it's kind of cool what she's actually done for women in film now. But yeah, when I was a kid, she was like totally my hero, and I was like, I want to make something like that. And I wanted to act at first, but I also too realized it was really hard, and I was really bad at it, so I stopped.
When I was in high school, I was making experimental video, and they were getting shown in galleries and at universities and stuff like that. And you know, I decided I was going to go to film school, and so the summer before film school, I started watching narrative films. And not that I hadn't before, but I spent a whole summer every day. I would watch movies and I would write a journal entry. I would like write about every movie I watched. And the movies that really got me were Spike Lee's Mo Better Blues and the Coen brothers' Barton Fink. Both for like their use of camera and sound, which were just amazing. And I actually ended up going into sound because of Barton Fink. And the facility I worked at, the mixer and the sound supervisor worked on all the Coen brothers movies. And so like I really pushed to go and work there because that was like the thing that set me off to want to make movies. And I ended up getting to work on a Coen brothers movie and a Spike Lee TV pilot. But it was great to like actually be in their presence. These guys that were my heroes when I was younger and are still somewhat. But you know, I'd say that was a huge influence that summer of watching movies and I watched every Spike Lee movie he had made. He was such a big influence for me that he like had the independent spirit and he was going to do it and he wasn't going to let anyone stop him. You know, that he was really important to me.
Thank you for that question. That was amazing. Well, we have to wrap up the panel. I wanted to. Oh, wait, do you have a question? Okay. Sorry. Okay, we can take 2 more short questions, and then we have to wrap up.
Okay. Hi, my name's Esther Friedman, and actually right after this, I'm screening at the web series Hysterical Historical Hillary. And my question is that there is a knowing do you guys handle rejection? Because you're passionate, and there's the flow, but there's a lot of times I've had a lot of closed doors, and I'm grateful that we've gotten this far. But I guess my question is, how would you handle rejection? And I think of rejection as God's protection, but I'd like to hear from the lady.
Short answers?
I would agree with you that it is God's protection, honestly. I believe everything really does happen for a reason, but for rejection, I think it's just continuing to be realistic about your goals and staying true to the message and what you're trying to do. You have to know that something will happen. It might not be what you think is supposed to happen. It might not be what you plan for, but something will happen. So whether it gets distributed through Brick or or it suddenly goes viral, like whatever it is, whatever is supposed to happen or whatever is for your highest good will happen. You just have to stay true to yourself and know that rejection is going to come at you all day, every day.
Yeah, and not take it personally. I mean, I say this as somebody who has to send a lot of rejections. There are some really good things that we simply can't do. But it's tough. I think you just think of every rejection as one step closer to a yes, because you're going to get probably 100 rejections for every yes.
And I think it's also important to not hand the power of the no into your own self-worth. You know, it's like, okay, that's how you feel about it. I still really believe in this. And let that carry you through, because that's going to be your stronghold, I think.
I don't think I'm very good at handling rejection. I'll be honest. There are days that I'm better at it than other days, and some days that I totally understand why I'm being rejected and I don't take it personally, and other times where I'm like, there is something at work here that I do not understand. And, you know, as a filmmaker, there are so many things that you cannot fathom are going on, why you might be rejected for one reason or another, whether it's a screenplay, whether it's a festival, whether it's a producer, whatever it is. There are so many agendas, there's so much going on economically, favors, etc., that I try and keep that in the back of my mind when there is a rejection. And sometimes it's enough, and other times it is not enough. Because of my ambition and my desire, and those things are real, and you have to figure out how to hold on to those things so you make your work. And, you know, for me, it's involved sometimes taking a break and regrouping and saying, do I want to do this again? This is so hard, you know? And then, but I keep doing it. And, you know, as Sam said, like, something happens. It might not be the thing you want to happen, but you have to respect the journey your project goes on, and that if you're open to it, you'll learn so much from it. And the people who show your work and love your work, they love you and they want you, and so you have to embrace that, because the human connection you'll feel is more powerful than what you can imagine if you're open to it.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for another question. I want to thank all of you amazing women on the panel today for joining us, and we have United Talent Agency, Maven Pictures, Brick, Largesse Media. If you want to speak with them after the audience, exchange some business cards, work with them, create some content, get a killer agent, definitely say after. To you out there, thank you for joining us at the Women in Film and TV panel at Livestream Public. We are going to screen Unsung Ingenuous after this. And thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.